Good morning, everyone. Today is May 2nd, 2022. It is 10:30 a.m. and this is a meeting of the Acushnet Bylaw Review Committee. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Board members, do I have a motion to open the meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Very good. First on the agenda, in the new business, we have a review and discussion of the following new and proposed amendments to the Town of Acushnet General and Zoning Bylaws. Number 1, to see if the town will vote to amend zoning bylaws Article 8 and add a new section, temporary moratorium on siting of large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations.
Big one.
Good twist of that. And today we have Doug to give us Doug Pimentel, the town planner, to give us a briefing on this zoning bylaw article.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy to be here. I believe this is very straightforward. Over the last 2 years, we've had a major influx in solar fields in the town of Acushnet, and there hasn't really been a bylaw to really address that. So the planning board is looking to put a 180-day solar moratorium into effect, which would essentially prevent any solar fields from being permitted at that time. This would allow the town and the planning board to propose a zoning bylaw to address large-scale solar array systems at that time. So hopefully come fall town meeting, the planning board will have a bylaw ready to propose at that time. So currently the town has 19 approved. There may be, off the top of my head, there's 6 or 7 built currently. So what I've noticed since taking on the role as planner, there's been an issue a lot of the times with the visual screening on these solar fields, and just numerous other areas concerns, the way we're accepting performance securities, and other ways we can protect the town further. That's
Planning board's proposing this, does that give you some breathing room to try to define what we got going on? Because I see you've got 19 approved large-scale projects. You said 6, probably I can think of, I don't know, Jimmy, probably 4 that are operational at this time? Okay, I know there's that small one out by the Shepherd's Pantry that was put up.
1209.
Okay, and so this is why this is being put forth by the planning board?
Yes, absolutely. It gives the planning board time throughout this summer to research what other communities in the area are doing, propose a bylaw to the Board of Selectmen, bylaw review committee, and then take it to the fall town meeting.
How is this going to affect the people who have already submitted plans or applications, and are they going to have to reapply? I'm assuming once this is done for 6 months, you're going to put forth a new bylaw or a bylaw amendment?
Yes, so at the moment, what is going to end up happening, if this gets approved at town meeting, any permits that have been approved before that are grandfathered in. Prior to that, however, if they are approaching the planning board to petition the planning board, if they get their plans in before this gets approved, then they are allowed to go to the planning process. But in that 6-month period, the 180 days, if any solar company approaches the town of Acushnet to get anything permitted, they won't be able to have their project permitted at that time.
So let me just get this straight. So you're saying that 19 that are approved now are going to be grandfathered in?
As the conditions that were approved under the standard set of conditions that the town's been approving solar fields, yes, they will be for their 2-year permit until they're able to get a building permit. So they get a special permit through the planning board. It's a 2-year permit. If they don't acquire a building permit within those 2 years, then they have to re-petition the planning board and resubmit an application to get their site plans approved. However, if they do acquire a building permit and they're able to begin construction within a year period, then they are set in stone. Nothing's going to affect them.
Okay.
Have any of them approaching that 2-year period?
We actually had 2 sites 2 weeks ago. Their special permits just expired, and their tolling period through the state of Massachusetts expired as well. So they would have to resubmit an application and petition the planning board again.
Under any new type of regulations or?
If they're able
or
to
review?
if they're able to petition the planning board prior to this being approved at town meeting and the attorney general, then they would fall under the current
Okay.
set of rules that we have.
And anybody else on the board? Any questions or how we feel about this?
I think for the planning board's sake, it's warranted. There are some issues that have come in to my department that I haven't been happy with. You know, Eversource is establishing new rules and regulations, which I think are extremely detrimental to the community. They seem to continually add poles or telephone poles for different segments of, you know, whether it's a shut-off and a metering and a blah, blah, blah. So some of these projects that have been approved actually have as many as 12 separate telephone poles. So even though the board can actually apply screening requirements, you can't screen, you know, a 30-foot telephone pole. So like I know there's one project that, you know, the board has actually, you know, entertained off of Robinson Road as you come in, you know, to the town, and there's 12 poles at the end of that field. So when you come into town, that's all you're gonna see. To me, it's gonna look extremely industrial. So I had gone to the Board of Selectmen suggesting that, you know, we charge $5,000 for each pole, which the board approved, and I appreciate. But I also think that there are requirements that under the special permit and under the list of conditions that the board applies, you know, I'd like to see the planning board go back and they can change the requirement and make them put everything underground. And, you know, this would also allow the board to begin to take a look at that. I mean, there are other communities that, you know, entertain different screening abilities. So I think it would be helpful to have the board be given that chance to look at that same thing. But I also feel quite strongly that they also, under the special permit, still have the ability to, you know, to produce some of that screening.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In addition to what Jim is saying, from the town clerk's office perspective, these solar applications were coming in fast and furious. And I think taking a step back, slowing the process down just a little bit, so that we know exactly what needs to be done, how it's impacting our town as a whole, and also ensuring that nothing falls through the cracks. I mean, as we all know, we've had a large turnover in some pretty significant positions within the town. And it would be very easy for something to fall through the cracks, and we want to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Good. Okay. Well, I have no issue bringing this to town meeting. You know, I don't know, do we need to make a motion on this?
I make a motion that we,
I would second that.
Okay, then we advance it to town meeting?
Yes.
And this, very good. All in favor?
aye.
Aye, very good. All right. So we will advance this zoning bylaw to the
It can't be fast
Article?
enough.
the town meeting next Monday night. Very good. Next on the agenda. See if the town will vote to amend the town of Acushnet official zoning map by rezoning a parcel of land identified in assessors records as map 15, lots 482 and 534 from the residential A zoning district to the residential village zoning district. So, Doug, you could fill us in on this?
Yes, two properties, one abuts the quarry directly, the other one abuts that other property. There's currently some development occurring in this part of town. As we know, the town is in an area where new growth is of concern. So identifying parts of town where we can increase growth to a certain percentage. So these two parcels, we'd be able to add a potential 10 to 13 buildable lots, depending on what the stormwater situation looks like for those two parcels once they go through that process. Additionally, transferring 534 and 482 from the residential A over to the residential village There is pre-existing water and sewer connection points at that part of Bradford Street. My understanding and knowledge of the creation of the residential village district was because there was water and sewer connection points to all those lots. This allowed that district to have smaller lots, so this would allow more houses to go into this part of town and create more conformity for that part of town. I felt like it was very straightforward, it made sense, and it's bringing new growth for the town of Acushnet.
So these two lots would be able to be subdivided into individual house lots?
Correct.
Probably, what, 10, 15 of them, or?
Give or take, it ultimately depends when they go through the stormwater process, what is actually buildable, what's flagged as wetlands, and all of that. But from a zoning perspective, in my understanding, they would be able to, a potential 10 to 13 buildable lots.
Okay. All right, another question I have when looking at this map that you presented to us. Just saying the right hand of the paper is it going east. How is it gonna affect the budding lot? Are they gonna, I see you got the two green lots, but then I see land with the road still continuing up. Are those also gonna be able to be,
The two further back that are not being rezoned, are those the ones that you're
Correct,
referencing?
correct.
So my knowledge of those two parcels are they're rather wet. However, there is development potential. I do not know the extent that sewer and water connects further back there. I wanted to target these two parcels of land first before we continue to identify other areas where we can extend the residential village district at that point.
okay. All right, so the potential amendment next year or something? or in years- or in years to
Possibly,
come.
but my understanding in being out there is it's very wet. So and it used to be a junkyard at some point in time, so there's significant cleanup that needs to occur to the lots. And having the right developers, the right contractors come into town, they'd be able to clean up the parcels to residential standards and make it livable for the residents of Acushnet. And they'd be doing a service for us instead of them dumping the parcel off of land onto us. And we're stuck with a contaminated piece of property, or the other hand of it where it's very limited. They could come to us with plans for 40B housing, and they put 40B housing out there, for example. So just little things like that.
Yeah, which our town does not have the percentage needed at this
Yeah, we're
time, right?
not even
Not
close.
even, not even close.
Which we should move in a direction for.
And we are starting
Much
to
so.
identify zoning through everything happening with MBTA and the commuter rail station hitting Church Street. Once that hits, that qualifying us as an MBTA community and the zoning requirements that we're going to have to start addressing.
That's correct, that's correct. Much like Rochester is having to do right now.
Yes.
Okay, questions, comments?
If I could, the previous owner of that parcel did sell it with the understanding that it was contaminated. They did do a 21A, which proved that it was contaminated, and when the owner of the property bought it, they knew that they were gonna have some substantial cleanup. And I think the issue became is when they first approached, at least me, they were going to look at it and develop in 21B unless the town would allow them to get the 3 house lots that they want to get on that parcel. That would allow them the ability to recoup their money from the cleanup, which basically removes, the top 1 foot of soil from, the vehicles that, drop
Leach
fluids.
into-
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I think it's a win-win for the town to do this. The town water and town sewer are right there. I don't think the parcel to what would be the west side of Pembroke, that's privately owned. I don't think they necessarily have the desire to, but it would really almost be a segmented of spot zoning to just do the 1 lot. It makes more sense to do both of them across the street.
Mhm.
So I'm in favor of it.
Anybody else? I know the planning board, after their initial meeting, they seemed
We
to come
had
up-
a public hearing on this last Thursday. They were in favor, from initial comments, they were in favor for both articles.
All right, so, board members, do I have a motion to advance this to Monday's town meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, Doug.
All right, thank you for your time.
Okay, next on the agenda. Just give me a second here to get the paperwork. We have stormwater bylaw amendment. See if the town will vote to delete the present language and replace it with the attached. And to give us a briefing on this bylaw amendment is Ms. Pat Hannon. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So, back in 2007, EPA required all cities and towns to adopt stormwater bylaws and to then make regulations through their stormwater authority. The town in 2007 was facing an enforcement order from EPA for not being in compliance with having made that bylaw. So the planning board did enact a bylaw that basically didn't meet the requirements of what was supposed to be done. I gave everybody a copy of a markup of my recommendations for changes to the bylaw for our consultant. The town has a consultant that does MS4 work for 14 communities. It's Conical Engineers and scientists. And they are completing our stormwater to have us in compliance by the end of May of this year. Otherwise, we could face a $100,000 penalty from EPA. So when I first read the stormwater bylaw, it wasn't being enforced by the planning board. And we had a stormwater agent, and it wasn't being enforced by the stormwater agent. And when I took over, it was kind of tough to go out and tell people that there's a bylaw and regulation that wasn't being enforced by the town, but now it has to be enforced. And in talking to town council advised the stormwater authority that the town never waives a bylaw. And you can't waive the bylaw. So to stay in compliance and not get a $100,000 penalty from EPA, I started requiring stormwater permits as the regulation and bylaw requires. It's been a very unpopular thing to do. So if you take the one that I marked up and go to page 4, you'll see the first change to what the planning board approved in 2007. And because the planning board hadn't enforced the stormwater bylaw that they enacted in 2007 all the way until 2021, and I had become a conservation agent, it made sense to approve stormwater at the same time conservation approved wetlands issues. The two go hand in hand. So the planning board voted to switch the authority under the stormwater bylaw, which is allowed by EPA and by the regulation, to another town body, and that was the Conservation Commission. So the Conservation Commission became the stormwater authority for the town of Acushnet. So that's the first change you see on page 4.
Pat, I just got a comment. You're telling, you're stating that for 14 years this town didn't enforce stormwater until your employment?
That's what I'm telling you,
Okay.
even though you paid someone to do it.
Well, and we adopted this bylaw back in 2007.
And you adopted this bylaw, and I, when I took over for conservation, I found a recording that was made in the office with an enforcement with EPA, between EPA and the present, at that time, stormwater agent and conservation agent. And at that time, they were threatening a $200,000 penalty if the town didn't adopt this 2007 bylaw and get into compliance.
Okay.
So this was an emergency situation for the planning board, but there is a boilerplate document that EPA supplies to cities and towns. And there's 2 versions of it. You can adopt one or the other. But there's not a lot of changes that can be made to their boilerplate document. So what the planning board adopted consisted of 7 pages. And what the EPA requires consists of 15 pages. So we were missing 15 pages of things required by EPA. Next, they were concerned that we had to enforce our bylaw. We hadn't required any permits. And we have to file an annual report. The annual report that went in from the Stormwater Board, being the Board of the planning board had false information on it. They wrote down that they issued permits, they wrote down that they did enforce it, they wrote down they did all these things, but it hadn't been done. And that was a reason for the change in stormwater agent to another person. So, as I started to enforce it, what the planning board passed, I found that on page 4 of what they passed, that if you were going to have any land disturbance on your property of 5,000 square feet or more, you needed to get a stormwater permit. And I can tell you that since I've started enforcing this, the average stormwater permit for a single-family home is running around $25,000. $20,000 for the engineering, and then $5,000 for it to be peer-reviewed by an outside engineer for the town. The bylaw mandates peer review, not something that the town can pass on. None of us have the expertise to go through stormwater calculations and all of the things and come to the conclusion that it actually works. So EPA requires a professional engineer, third party from the town, to make those determinations. And that's added $5,000 average to the average person. We have a solar field in town that's going through stormwater, and what was approved, it didn't work upon peer review. There were 42 deficiencies in their application, and they're about, I'd say they're about $50,000 into stormwater right now. And that's a lot of money. So if you were gonna put a driveway in your house, and it was gonna be more than 5,000 square feet, it was gonna cost you $20,000 in engineering to do that. So my recommendation was to reduce that to 40,000 square feet. To increase that to 40,000 square feet. Our outside contractor from Conoco said that most towns start at 1 acre, rather than figure out to the square foot what an acre was. 40,000 feet, seemed pretty reasonable. The next change that I recommended on page 5 of the existing bylaw, again, changes a 5,000 square foot requirement to 40,000 square feet. On number 3, paving or other changes in surface material over an area, it said 5,000 feet was changed to 10,000 feet. If you increase an area to 10,000 feet of impervious surface, it'll be a little harder to control your stormwater. You can't let your stormwater go onto somebody else's property or make improvements to your property and direct stormwater onto their property. And that's what this is all about, is demonstrating that you won't increase stormwater off of your property onto someone else's or into the town's stormwater drainage system. The next change was in B of exemptions. The following land disturbing activities may be performed without a stormwater management permit, and it's any activity with a certain area less than 40,000 square feet. It can't be applied to contiguous properties that may have been subdivided. So you can't sneak by on a subdivision approval of 5 acres or 10 acres and say it's a single family house and each house is going to be less than 40,000 feet. It's the project as a whole. You can't segment that. So they still got an increase by 35,000 feet to not need a permit. And those are the changes that I recommended to the Conoco engineer. So the Conoco engineer came back with what you folks now have was proposed for town meeting, which is a complete replacement of this outdated and incorrect bylaw. But we started trying to just make these changes before I realized that we were 8 pages short of having the right document. So the new stormwater management bylaw actually has a table of contents on the front page. It spells things out perfectly. We only had, I think we only had 9 definitions in the original stormwater bylaw. There's probably 20 in the new stormwater bylaw, and those definitions are required by EPA. And the biggest change that EPA required was changes in levels of total suspended solids that can be released in your stormwater. So it was 75%, it's been increased to 80%, not our choice. This is a federal mandate. And the other part is that the town has to investigate illicit discharges. And we do have some illicit discharges in town where people are hooking their washing machine up to sump pumps and pumping it out in their lawn. They've got apartments in their basements and showers in their basements, and they're pumping it onto their lawn and out to the street. Right now, Conoco is in the midst of doing illicit discharge investigations in the sewers. We're doing all the outfall testing, and we're getting everything ready for the June report for EPA. June 1st, we'll be in compliance as of 2021 with everything that EPA wants, other than passing this bylaw and having it become effective. But it will be in our report that it's been presented to town meeting, it's been voted on at town meeting, and we're waiting for the Attorney General's office to approve it and have the town clerk post it and become effective. If it doesn't pass at town meeting, then we'll be forcing an enforcement action. But this doesn't have any regulations in it. This just gives you their requirements and their definitions, and it gives the now Conservation Commission as a stormwater authority the requirement to pass a regulation that goes along with this to meet these new standards. Our current regulation doesn't allow for low impact design credits for stormwater. So if you wanted to currently spend extra money on your project and install these low impact designs like stormwater swales that are vegetated to slow stormwater down and give an opportunity to infiltrate, you can't. We don't allow that here in Acushnet. It's backwards. And we have some significant projects, and one of them is a solar field that was denied the credits for low impact design because our regulation doesn't allow it. And they're going to incur another couple of $100,000 worth of work to fix some issues on their site. We have 4 or 5 homeowners in town that have bought property and didn't understand that there was a stormwater regulation because it hadn't been enforced. This is, relatively new. And to meet the current stormwater regulation and not be able to use the low impact design credits, and in fact install something that's actually better for the environment, they were going to have to spend another $20,000 or $30,000 in their project. So they've elected to wait until this bylaw passes and the new regulation passes from the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission, once the bylaw is approved and ratified by Pam and on the website, will hold a public hearing. We have a new regulation all drafted. It's been presented to all the members for them to read it. And after a public hearing, that will be passed, and it becomes effective 14 days later. It doesn't go to town meeting. The bylaw gives the authority for the stormwater authority to make regulations. So that will become a regulation, and the residents and folks that are building houses will benefit greatly. There's nothing in here that feeds into the baloney that's going on Facebook that this is all bad for the town. This is all good for the town. Because right now, if you enforce it, people are going to spend $25,000 for things that they won't need to spend after this passes.
Mr. Merrick.
Pat, so if they actually do move forward with advanced design, then that gives the flexibility to the Concom to approve without them going through the engineering process?
No, you still have to go through the engineering process if you're going over 40,000 square feet.
Right.
But you will be allowed to use low impact designs and other cost saving measures to control stormwater. But right now, our bylaw doesn't allow us, our regulation doesn't allow us to consider those credits.
But I mean, are there standard low impact designs that homeowner can use?
Yes, it's all in the stormwater handbook from DEP. The other thing that the regulation adopts is that the stormwater handbook from DEP that's been in existence for longer than I can remember is the guiding document. So we're not putting any onerous conditions into our regulation. We're basically saying the town of Acushnet adopts the stormwater handbook by DEP, and you'll follow those standards. And then, yes, we do allow low-impact design. And we have changed the 10,000 or 5,000 to 40,000 and so on and so forth. So,
Is there a municipal exemption or DPW exemption?
yes, yes, there's a host of exemptions in it.
The only other question I guess I have is under number 10 where the variances are, where you have the B,
Are you on the new,
it says no variance request will be granted.
which document are you on, Jim?
Page 7, number 10. Under
The existing one?
The one you have here.
So the existing bylaw?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you're gonna add that B in there, right?
Where is this now?
Under variances, page 710, your red B, not letter B, but the word B,
Yes.
where it says will. This is a technical thing, but should that say shall?
No, well, it can be shall, but this went through town council.
I just know like in our bylaws, they distinguish between the word will and shall. I think Dan.
And I'm a guy who changes may to shall as well. I don't like anyone says we may do this, or, we'll do this when it's convenient.
Right.
No,
that's-
you'll do it in a date certain.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's good. Thank you.
Anyone else comments? I mean, from what I've heard, I think it's a move in the positive direction. I know we do have to start enforcing these stormwater bylaw regulations that have been established, and the point being that they haven't been done by this town for a number of years, and now they're being implemented is putting us in the right direction. We all know that we can be into an area of non-compliance and be fined as a town for not following these rules, so.
And it would be significant fine. We're not talking about $5,000.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And essentially, Pat, what you're saying though is we don't really have a choice in this.
We have a choice in the regulation that the Conservation Commission will bring forward after the bylaw.
Right.
But you don't have a choice in this document.
Adopted.
But there's nothing in this document that really makes anybody do anything. The meat is in the regulations. Yes.
Very good. That's what we got. We got a motion to move this amendment.
I'd like that.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Thank you very much, Pat.
We had to take the shot at
Okay, next on the agenda, and last but not least, citizens petition to see if the town will vote to amend the bylaw, the current soil conservation bylaw. Pass that down in case you don't have a copy of that. With the attached edited language, with crossouts representing as deletion and underlined bold text as additions. Pat, you didn't have to go sit down.
I needed the exercise.
Hey, look, I'd just like to just make a factual statement that we do have, and it was passed last year, at a town meeting, by the citizens of Acushnet, the soil conservation bylaw as presented to us written right now. And that was amended last year at our town meeting, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I think some people are looking at this amendment to this bylaw as the creation of a new bylaw, which it isn't.
Correct. Ian, do you have a copy for me?
Oh,
So-
I'm sorry, yes.
Why don't we just touch upon some things?
I should have brought it.
We can have some comments about this, because I would like to touch upon things, because a lot of stuff has been said over the last week about this, this bylaw amendment. That is a citizen's petition, and that in itself advances this to town meeting. This Board of Selectmen, the Soil Board cannot steer this in another direction.
You have no choice.
This is advancing to town meeting. And I know we have a public comment hearing next week. I know we had one on August 21st, so the planning board hosted one, which I believe some comments were made that were completely incorrect. Just by reading the bylaw, I could argue against comments that were made. as if digging a hole in your yard or constructing a house is gonna trigger a soil removal permit. Clearly, in section 4 of this bylaw, which was adopted by the town last year, an exemption is stated, let me get to it, it's on page 9. Such earth removal is necessary in connection with construction of a building being built in accordance with a permit issued by the building inspector. Jim, you're sitting right next to me.
Yeah.
Okay? So building a house does not require you to get a soil removal permit.
Building a house or any building, any structure, any construction in accordance with a building permit issued by the building inspector, you're allowed to remove all of the associated dirt associated with that permit. So if you said on your plans you needed to move 50,000 yards of dirt to build your buildings, that's exempt. It's exempt. It doesn't require an earth removal permit. Now, if you want to go move 50,000 yards of dirt and not build a house, that requires a permit. But there's an exemption that no one has read about. They obviously didn't read this when they made their comments.
Also, too, I've been, comments made on social media and spread by public relation firms to contractors in this town and to residents that say, if I put a pile of dirt on my property that's 10 by 10, if I have a truckload, an 18-wheeler come because I'm doing landscaping and I drop it on my property, to move it is going to trigger a soil removal permit. Also in section 4, when incidental to landscaping or similar activities for which building or zoning permits are not required. Jim, do I need to get a permit to have a load of dirt dumped on my property?
Not by me.
And not by the soil board either.
Okay? So I'm just trying to state facts that are being put in it,
Yeah.
that are contrary to what's being put out there. We're gonna have a public hearing on Thursday night at 7:30 concerning this matter directly. And we will address the issues that will be put forward.
Paragraph by paragraph.
And we will address the situations that some of our town contractors are worried about. Okay? To name a few, DeTerra, Fernandez, Norman Fredette, who store piles of dirt on their property. They're not mining dirt, they're not mining as a quarry, they're just small businessmen. And I think people are getting a little carried away right now that the soil board is gonna treat different companies as the same. Guy with a one truck is not the same as a company that's gonna put 400 trucks a day through the town. So I think we all need to step back a little, get a copy of this bylaw, which is already in effect, read the changes that are being proposed, and go from there, and have a discussion that's educated on this matter.
But I think it's important that the bylaw review committee knows why the bylaw was amended in 2021. So your first bylaw for soil removal is 1989. You had maybe 4 definitions of earth removal in your 33-year-old earth removal bylaw. I don't live in Acushnet. I haven't been to Acushnet much in the last 33 years, but I think the town has changed a lot in 33 years. So there were a lot of problems in town with dust complaints, dust complaints, dust complaints, and dust complaints, truck traffic, non-compliance with people that already had permits, but our bylaw was so vague, we couldn't force them into compliance. So working with town council, I assisted in drafting amendments to the 33-year-old bylaw. And in that bylaw, we added definitions that were significant to what goes on today in the world of construction. And something that everybody missed in the existing bylaw approved on May 10th, 2021, is that there's a definition of a large operation. And as we heard the planner explain, the planning board was extremely concerned about all these solar field proposals. I was the acting town planner at the time that this came up. And the planning board wanted to have a moratorium on, just because they were concerned that acres and acres of trees were being clear cut. 50 acres, 60 acres, 70 acres of trees are being clear cut in town to build solar fields. So in the interim, I took a dust training class in California to become a certified dust control manager. And in looking at their regulations and looking at their definitions, a lot of that made sense to use some of that here. And a lot of that has been adopted by EPA and other communities around the country. So what everyone has missed in the current bylaw from 2021 is there's a definition of a large project. And a large project is any project that disturbs more than 50 acres of land. That's a significant amount of land, but that, for me and the planning board a little bit, covered 50 to 70 acres of protection and regulation for solar fields absent a moratorium. So outside of the 50 acres, and we only have 2 gravel pits in town. They are both unfortunately closed for non-compliance, both of them, because they were working under the premise of a 33-year-old document and felt they were grandfathered from everybody. And that's what everybody says when you go to try and enforce something in this town, is I'm grandfathered, or someone said it's okay. So we adopted language for large operations. We put in requirements to apply for a permit, but if you're gonna be taking dirt from a stockpile, and under the definitions of earth removal, removing dirt from a stockpile is now earth removal. Because under the 33-year-old bylaw, earth removal wasn't the fact of taking dirt out of the ground, blowing things up, digging 100 feet down. It was when the dirt left the project. So we could only control dirt going out the gate. We had no control over what went on in the operations. So that got changed, that earth removal is removing dirt from a stockpile. And yes, it says 3 feet taller or greater than 150 square feet. But that's just to get the control. Further on in the bylaw, it says that the soil board has the right to set conditions. So let's take one of our contractors in town who's not removing earth from the ground, but under the bylaw definition has stockpile dirt higher than 3 feet, bigger than 150 square feet. He needs a permit to remove that dirt. But he doesn't need to do everything that the large operation needs to do. He simply needs to file an application with the soil board. I have a soil stockpile that's 20 feet tall, 50 feet around, and this is where it's located. And this is how many truck trips a day I want to have. This is how much dirt I would like to have in my stockpile, and I would like a permit. And the soil board checks with the police department. Have there been any accidents at that location from trucks going in and out? And you check with the building department. Have you had any complaints? You check with the health department. Have there been any dust complaints? Have there been any stormwater problems? Have there been any odor problems from these operations? No. Okay, then it's a very basic permit where, again, under the bylaw, the soil board has the right to set the conditions. It could be as simple as file a plan of your stockpile, give us a 1-page document on what you'll do if there is dust. I'll spray it with the hose, I'll put some sodium on it, I'll do something. There's a definition in the bylaw of high wind conditions, and it's 20 miles an hour. So you can say if I have high wind definition, if we have 20 mile an hour winds, I'll wet it down. If we have complaints, I'll take care of it. How many truck trips? Like you said, Dave, 5 a day, 10 a day, whatever it is. Large operations are in the hundreds. And when you get to an operation that has 100 truck trips one way and going back out, it's a truck every 2.3 minutes coming down that street. And that would be excessive for a small operation. So our contractors in town have overreacted to the misinformation that was put out by PJ Keating. They're behind this. I read the document. It's not true. The Boy Scouts aren't going to be affected for having have a mulch sale. They don't need a permit. People didn't read the bylaw. I don't even think that the planning board read the bylaw when they discussed it the other night. And that's a tragedy for all of the stuff that's going on in town now, especially over the weekend. The changes that are made by the residents, it's a citizen's petition. It's the citizens that live around the quarry and are affected by the quarry. They sent it to the clerk sent it to the departments that are involved in this. It came to me, and I read it, and it's nothing like anyone is saying. And the biggest confusion is that passing the 2021 bylaw that's already been passed needs to be stopped. And Keating has fired everybody up in town that the 2021 bylaw is a new application. And that this is what's gonna be passed at town meeting. That's the word that's out there. So I read the letter. It's signed by Keating's public affairs person and distributed to everybody. So if you go to the citizens petition, and as I said, they're the citizens that live around the quarry, so they've made amendments based on what I've read that they think affect the quality of their life and what they're being subjected to there. And it's pretty specific. So if you look at it, the changes are in red line and blue. So the first change are in definitions. The definitions are probably one of the most important things in a bylaw or a regulation. Contractors try and interpret everything, and they try and interpret everything to their benefit. I was a contractor, I did the same thing. You always look for the whole. So what's being added by the citizens petition is they want to add a definition of wrap or other allied products. And prior to that, it only said or other allied products. Wrap is recycled asphalt product. So the bylaw says you need a permit to remove soil from stockpiles of materials, and materials smaller than 12 inches. But it didn't say that wrap was material. So in their mind, Keating could have removed wrap without getting a permit and loaded it in their asphalt plant. I actually called the person in Florida who worked on this. She's on vacation, and asked why some of these were done. So that's the background on that. Then the next red lines are just the lettering changed. And then for G, they added the language for the purpose of the bylaw. Actually, is that existing language, Pam, because it's in blue?
According to what was presented to us, no, that would be new.
That's a change? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So it's to regulate earth removal operations and landfilling operations for the protection of human health, public safety, welfare, and the town's natural resources in the town of Acushnet. Further provisions of the bylaw are intended to protect abutting property owners from drainage problems that could potentially be created by poorly managed earth removal and or filling operations. So there's a definition of an abutter. And this has probably been the biggest thing anyone has complained about. Currently an abutter is an abutter to an abutter or someone across the street. When you're, and this was what I got from, and I'm gonna say her last name wrong, but Deb Poltzlepek. Tough one for me. And they felt, the group that she's involved with felt that if someone's gonna operate a 50-acre site or a 20-acre site, and they're gonna be digging down 100 feet or 200 feet, they're gonna be blasting, would you really wanna limit the notice to just the people across the street from it? Or would you wanna cast that net a little wider in town so that people didn't call up a month after this operation started and say, what the hell's going on down there? I didn't know about this, and I've lived here for 30 years. These operations affect people for a greater distance. Traffic, noise, dust, all that. So they proposed 2,000 feet.
So the comments made that if I'm putting up a house, I gotta notify people 2,000 feet away from me, or if I'm digging
The soil,
in a sand pit, as I've heard,
the
or
soil,
whatever.
the soil board has the right to set the conditions and what you want. And the soil board would have the right, when the application comes in, to say, well, this is for a stockpile, that, the guy's gonna run one truck in and out of his yard. We don't need to notify abutters for 2,000 feet. We're gonna go with our standard abutters to abutters, or 300 feet, whichever it is. I've read this so much.
Because the soil board does have the authority and some latitude,
You have great discretion
great discretion.
under the bylaw. You do. You
Okay.
just can't ignore it. So the next item is a definition of the word contrary. So the town's bylaw, since 33 years ago, has stated clearly that earth removal in the town of Acushnet is automatically considered to be contrary to the best interest of the town. If you want to obtain an earth removal in the town of Acushnet, your application shall demonstrate that your operation will not be contrary to the best interests of the town. And you're going to provide a plan of how you're going to prevent it from being contrary to the best interests of the town. They picked up on the fact that there was no definition of contrary. It's a very minor change, but it now has a definition of what contrary means, and it's a fact or condition incompatible with another. I'm not an English literature major, so I don't know. The next was an amendment to a new definition from the 2021, where they wanted to add the word mined to destabilized and mined. They felt that earth removal was a little simpler than proposing a mining operation. And our bylaw only contemplates earth removal. Mining is earth removal, but they felt that they just wanted to insert the word mining.
Is PJ Kitty considered a mine?
Federally, but not by the town.
Okay.
They have a federal mine license, but under the town bylaw that they've been applying for permits and paying fees for quite some time, it's an earth removal project, and if you read the bylaw and read the definition of earth removal, it's rock, bedrock, ledge, it's all of the things that you would encounter anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the next was dust suppressants. And in the 33-year-old regulation, it said that you wouldn't let dust go beyond the property line that would be objectionable. Well, that's a very subjective thing. Not objectable to you, but maybe to him, and so on and so forth. And that was changed to dust suppressants are water, hydroscopic materials, non-toxic chemical stabilizers used as a treatment material to, and it said reduce. And the neighbors aren't happy with reducing because that doesn't tell you what the level could be. And they want it changed to prevent fugitive dust emissions beyond the property line. That's what the people who abut require. They want them to control their dust and keep it on their site. They don't want their dust on their houses and their cars and their yards. The next change is on page 4. There's been a lot of speculation in town that because I was in the filling business, that I came to work for the town because I want to fill the quarry in with dirt. That's not true. So again, anything that contains 50 or more acres, dealing with a large operation, not preventing somebody from filling a hole in their backyard or anything like that. But they've added about the disturbed surface soil or any soil removal or filling. They want to make sure that filling comes into the purview of the soil board. They want the soil board to have some discretion over that. And it's not for everybody. Again, if you look, this is for anyone who has a throughput volume and removes more than 15,000 yards a year. So the second permit you have in town for earth removal is Pico Stone, and their permit was for 15,000 tons a year. So that wouldn't affect Pico Stone either. They would be considered a large operation under that language. And then fill. We had a definition of fill. There was not a definition of fill in the 33-year-old bylaw. So The neighbors felt that, again, recycled asphalt product wasn't covered under the filling provision. They're nervous of the contamination that leaches out of recycled asphalt product and maybe having the quarry somehow reclaimed with a bunch of recycled asphalt product and leaving a hazard behind for the town. So that says RAP shall mean asphalt millings, the material produced from the milling of roads before paving, and pieces of asphaltic roadway pavement removed from the roadway surface. That's all it means. It's nothing onerous for anybody in town, not going to affect anybody but someone with 50 acres or more. And then filling of land. They're very concerned that the quarry is going to get filled in with contaminated dirt in their neighborhood, rightfully so. So they've got a definition of what that is. And then they include a definition of proposed fill material to make sure that if anyone proposes filling, there's a definition of what those materials may be, and that you can't just put lipstick on it and call it something else. Soil removal didn't change, none of those things changed. The next change is on page 5. And it's A, it says, no earth shall be removed from any parcel of land within the town. And then the change is, and no earth filling operation on any parcel of land within the town, except as hereafter provided and only in accordance with a written permit issued by the Board of Selectmen. This gives the Board of Selectmen the authority to regulate filling of projects in town. I spent 25 years in the business of doing filling projects with materials out of Boston. It's a very, very unpopular business, but there has to be a place for dirt to go. And towns that don't have regulations get subjected to projects that they don't want. And all of a sudden, you've got 2 million yards of dirt coming in, and there's a truck every 2.5 minutes. And they're saying, you know, what's going on? And the selectmen say, we have no authority. We have no regulation. The neighbors want you to adopt that language. And then the next change is no permit for removal, and again, or filling. They're adding the word filling. They want you to not be able to give a permit for filling shall be granted unless the Board of Selectmen finds that such removal or filling, subject to the conditions imposed by the permit, and again, will not be contrary to the best interests of the town. And that's probably the most important word in your bylaw, is contrary to the best interests of the town, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And then no removal, and again, or filling operations subsequently conducted under such permit shall continue if contrary to such interests. So if you find that it's contrary to the interests of the town, you have the right to suspend it. You have the right to revoke it. The next is number 2. Will produce noise, dust, vibration, odor, or other effects observable at or beyond the lot lines in amounts seriously scratched out, objectionable or detrimental to the normal use of adjacent property. Some of you know, Jim and Dave, you know we get complaints when there's blasts, that people's houses shake and their foundations crack. Everything says that their blasting is being done in accordance with what's allowed by the fire marshal's office. But they want something in there about vibration from blasting. They just want that word in there. And as far as odor, there's been a major uptick in odor complaints since the asphalt plant started back up last season.
Well, I think the residents in the neighborhood, at least my take on it, is understand, vibration. You hit it right on the nail on the head. The quarry is compliant with the vibration allowed when they blast.
Under what the fire marshal's office allows.
Fire marshals.
Yes.
Correct.
But this would give the town the right on behalf, and again, discretionary. It's not a mandate, but you would be able to listen to your residents and say, the vibration is excessive, so we're gonna bring in an expert on blasting vibration and see if we can reduce those vibration levels. That's all it is. That would take a bit of work, but
Well,
I don't see that it hurts anything, because again, it's to the discretion of the
When you
board.
use the term discretion, that always concerns me. because we really need to ensure that we've got consistency.
Mhm.
And how are we going to determine that if we have a different board?
Well, my comment to that would be, we elect a new board member every year. So if you didn't like their discretion, you'd have your voice at the polls. But the bylaw, the law, Mass General Law, says that they have the discretion to impose special conditions. And it would take a special condition to set any new vibration levels.
Well, just accordingly, if the residents said, we think it's too much, and it'd be the discretion of the board. If the board feels that it's not too much, then, then
Get voted out.
you vote it, right,
You vote it
you're
out.
right. Well, no, I'm just saying, an existing board, if the residents came and said the vibration's too great, if I was on that board, the first thing I would check with is the standards that are allowed by the fire marshal.
Right.
And look at the seismograph, because they do have those for every blast that occurs at the quarry.
Yeah.
And if they were in there, then I would probably have to take it to them, if the residents still said, gee, Dave, no, really, it's worse, then I would look at the complaint. I mean, did their house crack? I mean, did the wall fall down? There has to be an understanding of the neighbors, in the neighborhood around the quarry, that it is gonna blast. They are gonna blast. They're permitted, I believe, right now to have 3 blasts a week. Or were permitted.
Were.
They're not permitted for the last year and a half, but,
Right.
Prior to that, they were permitted to do blasting.
Yes,
And there is gonna be, vibration and that sort of thing. The odor, I understand. I've gotten phone calls last September. I observed it, I went down there and observed the noisome issues, the smell that was created. And, I understand the wind blows this way, the wind blows that way, but, I understand that, so,
And
if you're asking what
it doesn't
discretion
create a
is-
regulation, it just gives them something to grasp and say, but Mr. DeRoche, it's in your bylaw that you can consider vibration, we'd like you to consider it.
Correct.
That's,
Correct,
that's,
at the discretion.
Yeah.
That is in the bylaw.
Right.
It is in our discretion. I'm not gonna be arbitrary and capricious and make rulings that I don't like this person or this operation, so I'm just gonna go the other way with it. As a member of the board. There is responsibility to be on the soil board and to be on the board of selectmen. And I don't take that lightly. So, but changes are being made, so.
so the
continue,
next word they wanted to change in number 2 was, it says, will produce noise, dust, vibration, odor, or other effects observable at or beyond the lot lines in amounts seriously objectionable. So they've struck out the word seriously. Again, they feel that seriously is a subjective word. Whoever is doing what they don't like could say, well, I don't think it's that serious, and we've been encountering that. We got on odor complaints. Our eyes are watering. We're getting dizzy, and the person looks at it and says, it's not that bad. Mr. Dorsch has witnessed that. So, and then again, they add more comments on, I'm sorry, I went to the top on filling, but on number 3, will result in, and they put in excessive, the word excessive transportation of materials on ways giving access to land in question, which will cause traffic congestions or hazard. Prior, in the 33-year-old 1989 bylaw, there was no language about traffic and truck trips and all of that. And I can imagine that in 33 years, traffic has increased. The Council on Aging probably wasn't there 33 years ago, all of those things. So, and again, it would be up to the soil board to determine what's excessive. And I think the soil board could figure that out pretty quickly. And then the next change is on number 6. Will have material adverse effect on the health or safety of persons living in, and it used to say the neighborhood. So they wanted to say the surrounding neighborhoods. I don't know. I don't think there's anything onerous there to just clarify that's the surrounding neighborhood. Number 7 is something that's under contention that people think isn't in the current bylaw, but in the 2021 bylaw, the town reduced the weight of trucks that could leave gravel pits in town from 103,000 pounds to 80,000 pounds. So the federal government restricts the weight of trucks to 80,000 pounds to protect their highways and roads. State of Massachusetts, for a fee in the thousands of dollars, will sell you a permit to exceed that limit to as much as 103,000 pounds for a dirt truck to 130 or 140,000 pounds for a truck that hauls heavy equipment. You pay for the permit, you can do that. Look at the roads in the town. Look at the money you have available in town to fix your roads. Do you want 200, 103,000 pound trucks pounding up and down your roads that you have to fix, not state highways? Or do you want to reduce it to the 80,000 pounds to protect your roads? Chapter 90 money doesn't come close that we get from the state to repair our roads. And you're constantly increasing the road with taxpayer dollars. You're constantly increasing that. So it's 80,000 pounds and it was accepted, it's adopted, it's in play. It's not new. It's not going to be passed at town meeting. That's another misstatement. I'm not supposed to say anybody lied. It's not a misstatement. It's a misstatement by those people. The next thing, again on B, any person wishing to fill a property. Again, it's about fill. There's a lot of hubbub in town about fill, so that the neighbors want to protect themselves from filling operations. And number 1 and B deals with filling. Number 5, the proposed method of performance security shall be a cash surety of $10,000 per acre to secure a permit. So in requiring stormwater permits now for projects in town, in the stormwater regulation, there's a requirement that when someone builds stormwater controls, builds basins, swales, things like that, they have to provide a maintenance cost to maintain all of those stormwater controls, including their basin, for 20 years. And they have to provide a surety to the town for the cost of that for 20 years. And they're pushing back like you can't believe, because it's a $60,000 or $70,000 commitment. And it even says that you would have to put up money for the eventual replacement of a basin, whether it's going to fail or not, but the town has to hold that money. The town treasurer, who retired, wasn't willing to accept bonds. She said the town doesn't accept bonds for surety. I called town council and said, this is crazy to expect companies to tie up $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 for 20 years of cash for a project. And a bond costs 2%. I used to buy bonds all the time for work, and putting up a 2% bond isn't as bad, but right now we're not allowing any bonds, and they want cash. I don't know the reason for that. I didn't even ask that question, but I would say at this time we don't accept bonds for these projects. So this maybe just spells it out, and they won't be surprised.
Pat, if I can ask, when you talk about $10,000 per acre is by what? Because if you are a 300-acre parcel, you're paying $10,000?
Of disturbed area.
But the disturbed area then is determined by the engineering prior to?
No, so, and this was a question that came up with the selectmen when we were working on amending the 2021 bylaw. So currently we have a requirement in our bylaw from 33 years ago and today, in 2021, that the way you operate a gravel pit is you excavate for 600 feet, and I may have the number wrong, but this is the sequence. You excavate for 600 feet, and then you fill in 300 feet behind you. And then you advance another 600 feet, and you reclaim another 300 feet behind you. And this eliminates the open areas, the unrestored areas, and the dust. So to give them an incentive to not have excessive areas open and to make it economically feasible, we're requiring them to close it as they go along and observe the bylaw. So it's $10,000 an acre of disturbed land is the surety. That's the reason for it. We have a
This is
gravel.
proposed disturbed land.
No, actual disturbed land. So if you get a permit from the soil board and you've got a 25 acre site that you're gonna use, but I'm only gonna operate 2 acres at a time. Now, some towns only allow you to have 2 acres to be open. The town I live in allows 5 acres. That's all you can operate. You can't have anything else open. So if you only want to open up a small gravel pit and have 1 or 2 acres open, you have to post a $20,000 surety. Not the surety for the whole project, only what's open.
Okay.
And the town has, some pits in town that have excessive acreage open. And to induce them to reduce that acreage is $10,000 an acre for a surety. And if you want to
I
be,
just don't read that in the bylaw, that's all.
it's there. Have you read the whole bylaw?
I'm going through it now, but,
You don't, but you don't have the whole bylaw here. You don't have the whole,
okay.
yeah. So, I don't think.
This is the actual citizen's
2021?
petition.
Of the whole bylaw?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I would urge you to look at it a little closer because it's intended, and point it out to me if it's wrong and we can fix it at fall town meeting, but it's intended to not charge anybody for the full price of what they get approved to remove earth from. It's how much open area they'll have at any given moment. That's what that's for. So,
Are there any amendments? I mean, is this, as it's being proposed, can we make amendments to this amendment
they can be made on town meeting floor?
on time meeting floor?
Absolutely,
Okay?
yeah, yeah.
Because, when I read it and try to take it as a whole, there are pieces of it that, really, I don't know if I agree with 100%.
Yeah.
Is this a take it or leave it kind of thing? Because
Right.
there are other things in it that I think are good changes to be made to it. So it's, once again, the surety thing, and we don't have a bond, so you're saying that they would actually have to put up, if you get,
Or the town has to elect to accept bonds. And our town planner is having the same issue with solar fields who have to post decommissioning bonds that are in the $170,000 range.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah, and we're asking them for cash for 30 years. Give us $170,000 cash for 30 years, and we'll hold it in the bank for you. That's a pretty onerous thing.
Well, it is.
And
It
we do
is.
have solar fields that have been constructed and operating and don't have sureties because we've been unable to resolve that. We don't hold any decommissioning bonds for these solar fields that have been installed because the former treasurer refused to accept them. So, we're unprotected at this time for 30 years down the road. We have plenty of time to fix it.
Well, that's what I'm just saying, as a member of the soil board, board of selectmen, and this gets, whether it's adopted or not, to put forward, I do think there needs to be a few changes or compromise in it,
My comment to town council was that we accept bonds from used car dealers. Used car dealers have to have a bond,
Mhm,
and we have $1 million bond from PJ Keating. We have $1 million performance bond from them.
mhm.
So at some point, in some conditions, we accept bonds.
Right,
As
right,
Pam said, it needs to be consistent.
Yeah.
correct,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think less.
Oh,
Yes,
yes,
Mr.
Dakin,
Chairman,
please.
as I sit here witnessing this, an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And, I'm just thinking out loud now. It almost seems like, should we take an all or nothing approach, or should we go through the changes individually? To your suggestion, say, here's the first change, I know it will lengthen the meeting. And how does town meeting feel about this? Here's the second one. So should we, is there any value in doing it change by change? Or do we take an all or nothing approach? I mean, that's what's going through my mind now.
So I'm a finance committee member where I live. I go to town meeting, and we have taken that approach on articles because an all or nothing thing wipes out some things that are good for the town. We're taking them one at a time. It's a fantastic, recommendation. Gives everybody that chance. Your citizens put some time into putting this together. They get their day at town meeting, and
Absolutely.
and if someone votes, if the vote is no on that one thing, no, then that's how it goes. I like to be right, but I don't have to always be right.
Right, because I'm just looking at when I'm thinking about, town meeting, if this is an all or nothing thing, one of these issues could sink the whole boat,
Right.
and, so that's my comment on it.
Yep.
you know.
And all the department heads have been asked to go to town meeting, so, I will be at town meeting.
Mhm.
You're making me wear a tie, but.
Right. So,
My
So-
concern would be to not lose the scope of what this overdue document is intended to do.
mhm.
If we get into nitpicking or contrary language which negates the, direction that's really required in this, these bylaw changes. So so therefore I would, caution too much, in minor changes or changes that really compromise the whole direction. And I think if I were opponent to some of these changes, I would do exactly that. I would start throwing all sorts of amendments and compromising amendments and everything else, and end up with a document that's useless.
But if you're gonna bring an amendment on town meeting floor, you need to bring it in writing, and you need to provide it
No,
for
but I
the
mean,
clerk.
changes, I would call change.
But they need to be in writing, and you need to present, I've made motions on town floor to change things, and I had to bring my motion written, it needs to be seconded, the clerk needs to get it. There's a lot to it. So someone's not just gonna get up on town meeting floor and say, I wanna change X to Y. They need it in writing, they need to be able to give it to the clerk. There's a process. And I think that our future town moderator has a good grip on this, and it's up to you folks. So,
Right.
the next one was, it used to just say method of removal, and now they want method of earth removal.
Right, so I'm taking from this to also that filling is a concern.
Filling is a major
A major
concern.
concern, because I see it outlined many, many times through this amendment to
Yes.
soil bylaw.
And this has been something that's been haunting me since I took my job, is that supposedly I took my job here to put Keating out of business and fill the quarry. The town I live in passed a soil importation bylaw. I took that bylaw and I adopted it to Acushnet, and I gave it to the Board of Health to put on their agenda and pass. And that was over a year ago. And it hasn't made the agenda at the Board of Health. But there is a bylaw, it's in a can, it's effective, it passed a few court challenges, it's solid. And it doesn't prohibit it, again, it gives the town the right to control it. If you don't have a bylaw prohibiting it, EPA can issue a consent order, and you've got millions of yards of dirt coming to your town. So, routes of travel and number of trips, they wanted to add the word truck trips. They thought it should say trucks. And actually, that would benefit someone who's gonna really, really interpret this right to the button, would say, I want trips of cars, delivery vehicles, I want everything that goes in and out of your property. This says trucks. And it didn't say per day. And something that's gonna be important, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, is the soil board is going to need to, in their special conditions, decide how many trips per day are not contrary to the best interests of the town. You're gonna have to make that decision. So, and again, it doesn't say whether they're coming in or going out, but a truck trip in a traffic study would be round trip, truck trips. They want it specifically spelled out here because everything gets interpreted by your large operations. Under K, filling, pops in again. And then the major one under K is for all active operations or large operations requiring a permit under this regulation, the board may consult at the applicant's expense and pursuant to General Law 4453G, a professional engineer, air quality expert, traffic engineer, and/or licensed site professional. This is in mass law, and it's for every board that issues permits or is quasi-judicial in decision-making, that we have the right. You submit something to us that's got all this technical information. We're not professional engineers, and your volunteers are not professional engineers. They're volunteers. They don't have the ability to decipher all these plans they present, and they have to take the presenter's word that it's what they say it is. So I started using peer review. This is what's called, is peer review, for stormwater. And huge discrepancies between what was being submitted by engineers and what the peer reviewers found. We had a project that water was flowing uphill. But some of our engineers were being sloppy because they knew that it wasn't being looked at before. From 2007 till now, whatever you submitted and whatever you told the board must be true and it got approved.
So, in this particular paragraph, they're asking, the citizens petition is asking for a more expansive air quality expert, traffic engineer to be included in the people that they already need now, because they need a professional engineer, a licensed site professional registered in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But this really, as I read this paragraph here, this applies to one particular business, because it says for all active operations or large operations.
Correct.
So,
And this is
and a large operation is contains more than 50 acres of disturbs or removes
more than 15,000
So
yards a year.
This is being directed to PJ Keating,
Yes,
which it already is being directed to PJ Keating because this exists in our current town bylaw.
correct.
They're just asking to expand, that they want an air quality expert and a traffic engineer. So
And
that's what I'm taking from this paragraph, and also to contrary to the best interest of the town. Right, we have that posted through.
they're
They're
obviously driving home the fact that they've latched onto contrary to the best interest of the town. That's what they've latched onto. And the reason that I believe they picked up on the air quality expert is air quality has been bad in that area. And in fact, the Board of Health voted to spend $8,700 on bringing in an air quality expert and putting in air quality monitors for 2 months.
Well, we did that back.
And we did that. And we,
And then went through the Board of Selectmen.
yeah, so the
That's
selectmen
appropriate,
approved it.
$7,500.
Yes,
We put them up to establish a baseline, and then plan is to put them up again when the quarry is operational,
yes,
and then we can get a real scientific data
yes.
that tells us exactly what we're talking about.
And
Without any perception or what side of the fence you're on argument, we'll have some data to support.
So we have collected data with the quarry not operating to get ambient air conditions when things are normal in the neighborhood, there's no operations going on.
Excuse
When the
me.
quarry begins to operate again, we're gonna bring that air quality specialist back. We're gonna put air monitors back out and collect information to show if there's been an impact or not.
Okay.
We also, through our state rep, Chris Hendricks, got a grant from DEP for 8 air monitors called Purple Air. And those monitors were distributed to people in the surrounding areas of the quarry, and they've been installed. And they're on the internet, They're on a webpage that reports all the information to EPA and DEP. They get to see it on a map. It's called Purple Area. You can go on the Purple Area map, and you'll see little green dots in Acushnet. And there's a number that tells you how much particulate they're measuring. The air monitors that we installed went to 2.5 microns for the diameter of the dust. The ones from DEP and EPA actually go to 1 nano something, which is actually invisible dust. You can't even see it, but you're inhaling it. And it's the most dangerous dust because it gets the deepest into your respiratory system. So that's why they added air quality expert in case
I understand.
someone wants to dispute that it only says professional engineer, but most air quality experts are professional engineers. But they want to remove that. And Jim, I just want to ask you one quick question. You made the comment when we were getting into all this dust stuff that when the roof was placed on the Council for Aging, there was an incredible amount of dust on the roof.
It wasn't in the roof necessarily, but it was in the gutter.
In the gutters, okay.
And it had settled in the gutter to almost 1.5 inches, so that when we actually had the fascia, the deal was to have the fascia painted, and the painter had painted the whole building except that area. And I said, no, I said, you gotta remove the gutter, because you can't paint it without it. When they went to take it off, the 4 gentlemen they had removing the gutter almost fell off the staging because it was
So heavy.
Yeah, it was so heavy.
Mhm.
And how many of our senior citizens should be subjected to that? So that's why they want it.
Do they have some conditions with the air conditioners as far as dust and debris in them?
I don't know, John.
I remember, that's anecdotal but
So,
Well, we are working with the quarry, or, you know, I think we're working with them.
I guess one of the questions that I have,
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, John.
No, that's fine.
But underneath Jay, so I'm taking a step back though, but I mean, I understand the reason for, you know, changing this, or having a slope no greater than 2 to 1 at the end of every day, but I don't see that that's possible in a quarry without an additional tremendous amount of work and more blasting.
but I'm gonna tell you that there's no change to that by the residents.
Well, I can see that that's.
I'm gonna tell you that that's been on the
before.
books for 33 years and the town has never enforced it. So, didn't get
Okay.
changed by me.
Well, I'm just, you know,
No, I understand that. That question has been
Yeah.
discussed on the soil board and between the board of selectmen on what that.
And that's something that, if the
So,
town.
I mean, that's what we're here to look at. All right, can we move on to,
Yep.
to C, the 2,000 feet, because I know there's a lot of talk about that, and,
Yeah.
you know.
So, it used to say 300 feet,
Mhm.
and the feeling is, once again, for an operation that large, I'm informed by the residents that there have been meetings in Fairhaven with the town of Acushnet about impacts to their town from
Mhm.
this operation. There's been meetings in New Bedford for impacts from this operation. When the asphalt plant started up since in its new location at the front of the property, we started receiving complaints from people that have never complained before and from areas that were never impacted before. Slocum Street, all the way to New Bedford and all the way to Fairhaven. We've received complaints. And they're their complaints. It's the people who got fed up enough to take this on. And it's in their mind that notifying abutters within 2,000 feet would be reasonable for an operation with those impacts. And again, it wouldn't apply, this is for large-scale projects. And this is, again, where you have the ability to put conditions and what you require in an application. So someone who's got a stockpile on Main Street doesn't need to notify abutters within 2,000 feet. You'll have checked with Public Safety and Board of Health and received any complaints. If there's been no complaints, I don't know why you couldn't just go with the original 300 feet.
Mhm.
It's no
Okay.
big deal.
No, but
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
wanna
I
put it
think-
out there. Go ahead, Jim.
I think my only concern, and I understand the reasoning for it, but I don't see in the bylaw a fee associated with establishing the public hearing. And if you have to notify, and you know this, Pam,
Yeah.
2,000 feet within the abutting property, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of people, and that's work on your department.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that's, I understand the fee then should go back to the petitioner, but just the amount of work, and there should be some association made with the Board of Selectmen to establishing a fee that compensates, the clerk and the laborer for all the,
And they have that right.
But, right, do other bylaws have fees in them?
yes, all the fees, all the public hearings we have
But I-
associated fees.
But I have a question on
You
that.
made a comment in the bylaw. I don't
Yes.
know if in the bylaw it actually says what the fees are.
No,
No.
it's
In the
set by the
application,
planning
it
board in
does.
the
No, okay,
application,
in the
yeah,
applications.
by the
Okay.
ZBA.
And that the board has the right to set reasonable fees.
Yeah.
Now, when I took over as the, as the conservation agent, I questioned why we were notifying abutters. When I was the chairman of the Conservation Commission where I live, it was up to the applicant to notify abutters. We gave you a list. The town gave you a list of people in the town within that radius. You made all those notifications yourself,
That's what planning does.
and then you brought the green cards to the meeting.
Mhm.
And one member of the Conservation Commission would sit there and match the green cards to the list provided by the town. And if all the green cards were there, the meeting proceeded. If everybody wasn't advised, the meeting didn't proceed. I would take the burden off of the clerk's office and have the proponents do this stuff. It's their responsibility. The taxpayer shouldn't pay to do all that, being a finance committee member.
Okay.
That's a discussion for
Right, that's
another
another
time.
time. I'm trying to
But you may be able to require that.
advance this and,
Yeah.
just so we can,
There are some pros and
mention-
cons to that.
Okay.
Mention the.
It worked for us.
Taking the work away from our office is a wonderful piece of it. But it does or could cause problems with others.
Cause and effect.
Exactly,
So-
exactly.
The next item was E, renewal of a permit for a period not in excess of 1 year may be made by the Board of Selectmen. In our current, even 2021 bylaw says that the selectmen can issue a permit without a public hearing, reissue a permit without a public hearing, if the Board of Selectmen, after a report from the inspector, finds that all conditions of this bylaw and permit then applicable have been complied with, and that the work has been carried on continuously in good faith.
So they want to strike all that,
They want to strike that,
and they want another public hearing every year.
because it turns out that when the soil board was department heads from the town and not the selectmen, they weren't requiring the inspectors
I know.
information. So there was no report that everything was in good standing and permits were being issued without new hearings.
And I think we made some strides in that area, that's not as it used to be,
Correct,
you know.
correct. I mean, the board has the right to request a hearing anytime they want. It just said you had the latitude to not do it.
Right, and we can strike any license in town.
Correct.
The Board of Selectmen can suspend the license at any time in town for violations or non-compliance issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next change is in section 8 on page 10. And it's the board or enforcement officer may enter upon the premises involved to inspect and ensure proper conduct of work. It didn't say when. And that's something that we even missed in the 2021 update. And it says during operating hours. And it only makes sense that the town's inspector should be allowed to inspect the quarry during operating hours. And then 1 says the inspector shall be required to notify the owner or petitioner before making any inspections on the site. They added. I don't know. Doesn't mean anything to me, but it means, it means something to them, and it doesn't really put anything onerous on the town.
Mhm.
Prior to the anniversary date of the permit, each petitioner shall specify the number of cubic yards of material to be taken out of his or her pit for the following year. At the end of the year, she shall file a sworn statement. Statement of how many cubic yards have been removed or delivered as fill material during the preceding year. Annual removal or filling shall not exceed the amount permitted at the beginning of the year. So there's been removed or delivered. So again, they're trying to cover their base on fill coming in. And we do require a statement from our gravel pit operators applying for new permits. I'm gonna give it to you in the case of Pico Stone. Pico Stone has been closed under an enforcement order since 2020. And looking at their gravel permit application, they had around 36,000 yards of gravel to remove. And they had the permit for, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 years. So I went through the record, and each year, they certified that they removed 15,000 yards of gravel. Well, if you do the math, that added up to over 300,000 yards of gravel that they said they removed from the property. They didn't. It wasn't there. There's another reason for that being there. So they want them to have to file a sworn statement under the pains and penalties of perjury that this is what you did, this is what you took out. EPA requires it from Keating, their permit requires it from Keating, the town should require it. I support that wholeheartedly. You shouldn't just be able to sign something and say, no harm, no foul if they catch me. So that was a good catch by them.
So with that being said, Pat, what would be the penalties?
What would be the penalties? Currently, in the bylaw, the first violation is $200. The second violation is $300. And these are any violations. We don't spell anything out for lying.
Okay.
I think for lying, you just wouldn't get another permit, that the town wouldn't be able to trust you, but we do have increased penalties now under the soil bylaw. And we've issued either 4 or 5 new cease and desist orders to PJ Keating in the last week and a half. So now they're at the $300 a day for every day that they continue to operate in violation of the court order. So we are now accruing $300 for a company that made $19 billion last year.
And that's per day?
Per day.
Every day in violation?
Yes.
Okay.
Every day the violation exists is a new violation.
Okay.
That's how that works.
Any other comments? I think it was a very good description of the amendment to the soil bylaw. Thank you, Pat.
Okay.
I know this is moving ahead. I don't know, do we need to put forward a motion? Because this is moving to town meeting as a citizen.
I would make that motion.
I'm sorry, excuse me?
I would make that motion. You want to move this to town meeting, there's a vote.
Absolutely. So do I have a motion to move this amendment to the soil bylaw to town meeting?
Okay.
Do I have a motion?
I've made the motion.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Okay. Well, I guess with our agenda filled up, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All in favor? Aye. Very good. Thank you very much.